Hi everyone, could we ask you to take your seat? We're going to start. I don't know if people outside are grabbing a coffee and then joining us. Just give 1 or 2 minutes more for people to take their seat and to make sure that you hear the introduction. So, welcome to this, this afternoon session, first session in the afternoon. Not the best timing, I know, coming after lunch, but I hope you could all get your coffees. So this is the second academic session on socioeconomic effects of forced displacement in host countries. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jérôme Elie. I'm the head of the Asia Displacement Solutions Platform, ADSP, based here in Bangkok. So this session will examine quite a central issue in debates and responses to displacement, and I think that's been mentioned already in the keynote lecture and in the first academic session. Basically, how forced displacement relates to and impacts socioeconomic conditions in host countries. We will have 2 speakers that will consider this topic from an academic perspective, but looking at their web pages, I think they also have a practitioner's profile, so that will be also interesting to have this dual kind of perspectives. The two papers contribute valuable empirical evidence to the debate from very different contexts. And I think that together they remind us that the impact of displacement and protection are neither uniform nor easily captured through assumptions. Our first speaker, and great that we have also in-person speakers, I think that brings a value added as well. So our first speaker is Sepehr Ekbatani from Khatam University in Iran. He will reflect on the impact of refugee populations on local housing markets in Iran, thus taking us to a very interesting and concrete angle. And then after his presentation, we will go to our second speaker, sitting to the left for the moment, Andrea Caflisch of IOM. Will shift us to a different context, IDP post-conflict setting, but in neighboring Iraq. And as I understand it, his paper draws from an ongoing study aiming to evaluate how the uneven rollout of economic recovery shapes social relationships between local hosts, internally displaced persons, and returnees. Each speaker will have about 20-25 minutes, I think, still, for their interventions, and then after each, we'll have a bit of time for questions. So I will invite Sepehr to the podium, and thanks a lot.
All right. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. As you can see, I'm coming from Tehran, which I was very worried that I cannot make it here. I guess not as worried as Domenico was, but I did make it, and I fled a war zone, literally, so it's just like it's quite fun. No, it's okay. It's not as bad, but like, I'm just making a scene here. All right, so I'm going to talk about like the effect of Afghan refugees in Iran, especially on or specifically on housing market. We're going to see whether they are burdens or they're builders. And this is a joint work with a student of mine who is of Afghan descent, Mohammad Mustafavi. He's going to start his PhD in Aalto University in September. He's just brilliant. I enjoyed doing this project very much. We thought like Afghans in Iran is kind of a blind spot in the economic research of refugees and immigration. So we tried to look at it for now with this project for the first one on their effect on the housing market. So enough storytelling. I'm gonna start with saying that I don't see Sandra here. But like this is the title of slide I borrowed from her paper is Refugee Crisis Always a Housing Crisis? I mean, we definitely know that when there is an inflow of immigrants into a country, there is going to be a increase in the demand of housing, and we expect the demand of housing to shift to the right. So Economic 101 tells us that we're going to expect higher prices, and this has been documented in all sorts of countries, from developed to developing. But what if, like, these refugees, these immigrants, kind of contribute to the supply side as well? That's going to be interesting, and that's what we're going to look at. It's kind of, we find it a bit unique to this setting that we're looking, and I'm going to tell you why. But when they contribute to the supply side as well, we expect the price effect to be muted or less severe. So that's it. I'm going to give a little bit of introduction of the context. Iran has always been a major host country since, like, forever, at least as long as I remember. There was a huge population of Afghans over there. It's kind of one of the largest hosts, one of the largest Afghan populations worldwide, and mainly it's because of the similarities in the culture and the language. So in Afghanistan, they speak Farsi, either Urdu or Pashto, which Urdu is very close to the Farsi that we speak in Iran. So the language barrier is not there as much. So it's kind of makes sense if you want to flee Afghanistan to come to Iran. And there was this sudden and exogenous shock in 2021 when Taliban retake, let's call it, or like, again, take over Afghanistan in 2021 after the US military decided to leave. And there was this sharp and unanticipated shock to the number of immigrants in Iran. Over 3 million people after 2021 entered the country. And they settled like all over, which I'm going to show you. And there are no like camps and stuff in the country to just like, so they would go live with their relatives for a while and then find their own places and stuff. Here I'm going to show you an image from a video that I wish I could unseen, but you cannot do it. It's just like after the takeover, there was this, I mean, I wouldn't look it up if I was you, but like they tried to clinch to a US Air Force jet to take them with them, which doesn't end well. But yeah, this is like how badly they wanted to leave the country. That's kind of like to show you that. And like for a historical figure, this is like the number of Afghans in Iran for like the past 2 decades. It was around like 1.5 million in 2006. It goes up to 2.5 million. It goes up to 6 million. So it kind of doubled after the takeover of the Taliban takeover, from 3 million to 6 million. The UNHCR number figures are more like the green ones, but they are like more official figures, the blue ones. There are some unofficial going up to 10 million as well, but like the 6 million is the number that we kind of go with. And a unique feature of this context that we're studying here is the concentration of Afghans in the construction sector. So Afghans in Iran are only allowed to work in 7 or 8 categories of jobs if they want a valid permit, residency permit. And the main one is construction laborers. If you can see, there is like a huge number of them who work as constructors. And the third one is also like building workers, which are like painters or plumbers, or still kind of related to the. And the second one is agriculture. Others just like are very minimal. And so this is kind of like one of the things that gave us incentive to look at the housing market and how they can, like, as the immigrant inflow, contribute to the supply of one specific sector. So you guys know the literature way better than I do. So in just this is an old slide. So if your paper is not there, it's gonna be in the paper. But like we contribute to 3 strands of literature. One is the forced migration in the host country. Second one is the immigrants and housing market, and third one is like immigrants, labor supply. Many great papers over there. So getting to the question that we're gonna ask in this paper is that, did the post-2021 Afghan refugee inflow increase housing expenditure in Iran? Or did the refugee participation in construction activity kind of offset the demand pressure? We're gonna look at the large sudden inflow of Afghans after the August 2021. We're gonna look at the province level variations in refugee exposure. In Iran, we use different data sources, and the empirical strategy that we use as the IV defensive. I'm gonna explain more details later, but we have the pre-2021, or like the pre-existing network of settlement of Afghans as one IV, and the residence restrictions. There is a policy that I'm gonna explain a bit later. In banned provinces, some provinces are banned for Afghans to reside in. These are the 2 IVs that we're gonna use. The main finding is that we find a small increase, let's say at best a small increase in housing expenditure. Like, it's very weakly significant. Like, if we change tiny bit of things, it loses its significance on the housing expenditure. But we find a very significant effect on the construction activity of the provinces that were exposed more to Afghans. It shows that the supply response offsetting a demand pressure. So we find the refugees not only be a demand shock, but a supply shock as well. So it's kind of like, following what Jean-Francois was telling us this morning. All right, a little bit on data and institutional background. We use like 4 main data sources. One is the household expenditure and income survey, which is annual data. It's household level controls. We have like many things from there. We add the nightlight data and everything that we can control for, which we've tried. But the thing with HACE is that it does not include nationality. So we don't know the guy who's answering the survey is Iranian or Afghan. So we turn to LFS, to Labor Force Survey, which includes nationality, and we observe where they work and their occupation. And we also use the 1996 census for the pre-existing network of Afghans, which was the first IV I mentioned. And we have this construction statistics for the supply side. It's province level and quarterly, the last one. Everything else is annual. This is a summary stat, just give you a sense of numbers. We have like around 40,000 households every year in HACE. And this one is missing observation, but it's like 31 provinces times 4 for each year. The construction outcomes, just to show you like the variables that we have is the housing expenditure, total expenditure, education expenditure, everything like that is mostly studied in the literature. We also have some variables for the quality of homes, number of rooms, floor area, etc. Okay. So kind of like something other unique thing about the context that we have is the banned provinces. In 2007, there was this law, or whatever you want to call it, from High Security Council of Iran that banned Afghans from residing in 16 out of 31 provinces. And I'm showing you the banned provinces here. This is the map of Iran and Afghanistan. You can see it on the west, on the east side of Iran, on the right side of that map. And you can see that most of the banned provinces are on the west, which it kind of helps our argument that they are not random, they are mostly on the border, but the thing is that like we don't know exactly why they passed this law, but the main thing that we think, and it was in the news and articles, is that like 2007 is right after the Iraqi invasion, and so the US Army was there, and they didn't want the western provinces to be, I don't know, like influenced by the immigrants, or like they wanted to be very nationalistic, those provinces, or whatever. Like, but we use this. I'm going to explain why this is important for our identification strategy. Again, like some of the, to show you some figures here, the left map here is the share of Afghan population in 1996, share of the province population, like Afghans as a share of population, province population, and the right one is 2023. So, and as you can see, the numbers in 1996, the unbanned provinces had 1.73% of their population as Afghans. Banned provinces had almost none, 0.56%, and in 2023, which just to remind you, the banned policy came in 2007, so it's in between. My point is that like the banned provinces didn't have that much of Afghans to begin with. In 2023, it went down, but for the unbanned ones, went quite high. The only, I guess, exception is Sistan and Balochistan, which is on the southeast. As you can see, it's close to Afghanistan, and they had a lot of Afghans in 1996. 7.73% of their population was Afghans, but now they have just like less than 2%. It's because of that. So this is kind of why we need the banned province IV as well, to kind of fixate the pre-existing network IV that we have. So the methodology is, I'm just gonna go faster, I guess. How much time do I have? Okay, that's the time. Amazing. I didn't know that's there. So we have a simple diff and diff there, which is Afghan share as the kind of treatment. We have a lot of controls, as I mentioned, the nightlight, the household demographics and population density, etc. But again, we know that there is this endogeneity concern. Afghans do not settle like randomly throughout the country. They might target the provinces with better labor market, the provinces with the lower housing cost. So these are all endogeneity concerns, and OLS wouldn't help us here. So we use IVs. The first one is the historical settlement patterns. I have 14 minutes. It started at 30, right? Okay. I felt like I've done like 5 minutes. Okay, sorry. So we have this Afghan population in 1996 in province P over the total Afghan population in 1996 as the IV for Afghan, we call it Afghan pre-settlement, as the IV for the Afghan share right now. If we use this IV only, we get a first stage F stat of 28. We have a second IV, which is the banned provinces. It's the 2007 policy. It's well before the inflow that we were studying. It's like 2021 is the inflow. It happened like 2007, and as I showed you, there are not that many Afghans there already. But it kind of captures the policy-induced deviation from the pre-settlement, the historical settlement that we have. That's why we use both IV, and that would give us like an first stage F stat of around 90. Going to the results, what we find, as I mentioned, this is from the HACE data, from the Household Income and Expenditure Survey. The top one, the top panel is showing you the OLS results. OLS doesn't show us any significant increase in the expenditure of any sort for Iranian nationals when the Afghans come in. But when we do the IV diff in diff, we get like a weekly significant positive of around 2% for an increase of 1% in Afghan population. In a province, we get like 2.3% increase in housing expenditure, but we don't find any significant or considerable increase in other sorts of expenditure. You usually get like total expenditure would go up, or like education expenditure goes down. That's very typical when refugees come in, but we don't observe it any of it here. The last two columns are kind of the quality of housing, and we don't see that going down either. We even see that number of rooms have gone up a bit. But as I said, this is like weekly significant, and if you change a little bit like how you cluster your standards and stuff, it would lose its significance. But the other thing that we have is the construction outcomes. And here I'm showing you the number of residential permits and non-residential permits. And as you can see, we get like very significant numbers. And it's interesting, if it was only a demand push, we would see that the residential permits would go up, but the non-residential permits would stay the same. But when we observe that the non-residential permits are going up as well, it shows you that it's probably like the lower construction costs and stuff that's going up as well. We get the same result for land and floor, which I'm not showing you here. We've done a bunch of robustness checks that I can show you. It's from like different type of identification strategies, and like leave one province out I can show you, but like I can ignore them as well. Just to get to the discussion and conclusion here, a little bit of discussion. There was this, I mean, after the first, like they call it the 12-day war, the last June, it was Iran versus Israel. US was not there yet. There was this mass deportation of Afghans because like there was these like many sabotages from inside the country. Mossad know what to do, but like they would blame it on Afghans, and they deported a lot of them. It raised up to like 50,000 people a day, which was pretty significant. And there are these anecdotes that the construction cost went really high up. Even we had this highest monthly inflation in fruit and vegetables because, again, anecdotes like Afghans would pick trees like at a very lower cost than Iranians. But we need the post-2025 data to examine them. But like this is very along the same line as other papers in the literature. Just to conclude, sorry, I'm a bit over time. We look at the post-2021 inflow of Afghans. We do not find that huge increase in the housing expenditure of Iranian nationals, but we find a significant increase in the construction activity of those provinces that were more exposed to this inflow. So we find that refugees were not simply burdens on local housing, but they were also builders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. We actually have time for questions. I see one there, so I don't know if I can get a mic. I see another hand there. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the mic because I guess for the online, they need to to be able to hear the questions. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and if you could identify yourself when you ask questions. Sorry, I find that it's always better to know who is asking the question.
Thank you. This is this is Chao from UNHCR. I specifically working for the Regional Bureau for Asia Pacific, so Iran is in my region. First, I want to say I really appreciate this study because we all know that there are large number of Afghans in Iran, but they are seldom put in the spotlight, either in the political dialogue or in the academic research. And also I know that it's super challenging because there's so limited data for this group of people and also in Iran. So I think this research is really meaningful, and also I'm also glad that you mentioned the future study for the large number of deportations and returns, because that's also what UNHCR is really interested into. From our side, we actually have some data on the returns from Afghanistan side. If you are interested in any kind of comparative study, we can get in touch with on that. By the way, the number of Afghan population in Iran, I mean, from UNHCR has been updated. It's publicly available, but we can share with you. And also, I want to mention that we are also working on a socioeconomic survey on Afghan refugees in Iran. The data collection started at the beginning of end of 2025, and it was interrupted by the military escalation. But it's resumed, and hopefully we can get the results soon. I think it's not specifically on the construction or the on the market, but I hope those socioeconomic data could also be helpful for the near future. And also, if you will continue this study for the impact of the military escalation this year, I think we can also see a lot of opportunities for the collaboration. I may have a very tiny specific question about the research. You mentioned you used the 1996 census data as a baseline. Why that year? Because I know that in 2006 and 2016, there are also census and also Afghans were included. And the nationalities can be identified. Why you don't use the, more updated data as a baseline for that? Also, you mentioned Afghans in Iran their presence might be associated with the socioeconomic conditions. I don't have much local knowledge, but is there any kind of local level policies also affecting the distribution of Afghans, or it's solely the economic factors? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe you can answer those two questions that came after the comments, and then we will have time for at least, I've seen a gentleman here, and I don't know if you have time, we take another one. But maybe you can answer the question first, those two questions.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Sure. Why 1996 instead of? Thank you so much. I'm gonna talk to you more about everything you said first, and then get to your question. Why 1996 and not 2006 and 2000? So we wanted to be like as far as away from the inflow to be a more valid IV, I would say. We even tried like the one before, but that one doesn't have the nationalities. But like the 1996 is the first one that has like a clean number of population of Afghans. And the local levels, I'm not sure there are many. Like, I would say that people around Iran are like more receptive somewhere versus less receptive somewhere else. But these type of policies is just like, it's a very centralized government, so you're not allowed to do anything by your own. So I would say that everything is centralized, especially at this type of like very important for security type of policies. Yeah.
Thank you. The gentleman there with the mic. Yeah.
I have three quick comments. One is I would expect more explanation about the definition of low expenditures. Like, is it just rent or mortgage payments? Because refugees could change housing ownership as well. So we need a more clear definition in that. The other key thing is you presented the event study as a robustness check, but I think it's it's not a robustness check. It's your checking your critical identification assumption. I think that's really important, especially in this setting. the two, banned and non-banned provinces could be very different here. One is in the West, ethnically different groups. So you really need to check that the trends are not, unobserved trends are not correlated with the instrument. I think that should be in the core of the analysis. The final thing is about your instrument. I think the denominator had also total number of Afghan refugees. I think the denominator needs to be local population, like the way you define the refugee population.
If you want to
Yeah,
react
sure.
to the comments, yeah.
Thank you very much. So about the expenditure, housing expenditure is basically imputed rent. It's either rent or if you own the house, it's going to be the imputed rent. Event study is a bit tricky when you have IV definitive. We are going to include like event study when using IV definitive. The event study that I put in the robustness check is basically what Sandra does in her paper, is basically using the pre-settlement shares as the definitive kind of the treatment. It's not in the IV definitive. That's why we put it in the robustness check, but for sure the event study for the IV definitive we're going to put in the paper. And the instruments, I guess in the literature they use both. Like they either put that in the denominator or you don't agree, but I'm pretty sure like we can discuss it more later, but we have done all of them, yeah.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one more question. I think there was maybe, if there is. No? Yeah, just there.
Thank you for the presentation. Only one quick question. Just want to understand more because you have data from different point of time and you measure the expenditure. Did you do the normalization of the value of the money between the two point of time? Because,
We definitely did.
I'm Winida from BPS Statistics Indonesia. Thank you.
So yeah, the main data that we use is from 2018 to 2023. And yeah, we have all the year fixed effects and stuff to capture anything that change yearly, like for example, inflation. And I guess if that's your question. It would be the same if you deflate the numbers or like include them, since you have logs.
Great. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you
Right on time. And yeah, thanks a lot for the good question. Yeah. I will now call to the podium Andrea Caflisch. So he's going to present his paper on economic recovery and social cohesion, a field experiment with capital grants in post-war Iraq. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. This is joint work that I'm doing with three co-authors, Stephen O'Connell at Emory University, Daniel Masterson at University of California, and Julia Smith-Omomo at IOM. And we'll be looking at the relationship between economic recovery and social cohesion. As the title says, you can see that picture from an artist on the cover slide. Traditionally, and especially in policy circles, we think of post-conflict recovery as an economic problem. It's about restoring livelihoods, rebuilding markets, and restarting growth. It's considered something quite separate from peace building, which is a different set of problems. And there is relatively little work that looks at the relationship between the two. And that's what we're trying to understand through this study. We know from previous work that capital grants can support the process of economic recovery by raising employment, income, and business activity, as well as psychosocial well-being. So there have been a number of studies coming out over the past few years that have shown this, including through randomized controlled trials and quasi-experimental studies. And while these effects don't always last in the long term, over the short and medium term, they find consistently quite substantial impact. But recovery is rarely uniform. We see that the gains of recovery are unequally distributed. And this uneven recovery can have competing social effects that push in different directions. On the one hand, they can help social cohesion. They can reduce scarcity, they can generate economic opportunities that reduce competition for resources and grievances. But on the other hand, they can also hurt social cohesion. They can create visible inequalities within communities that result in perceptions of unfairness and potentially resentment towards the people who are benefiting from growth. And so the net effect of recovery is unclear, and we're trying to resolve this ambiguity through our study. So the question we're trying to address is, to state it more formally, how do uneven gains from economic recovery affect social cohesion within communities? So we focus on the communities themselves. There is another question about social cohesion between different communities within the same country, which we don't address. That's an important limitation that I should flag here. And we study this by looking at a targeted business grant program that is intended by its stated goals to promote economic activity and local development, but also stability in communities that were heavily affected by conflict. So this is a grant that targets a mix of host community returnees and IDPs in communities that were affected by mass displacement, where most of the population generally was displaced during the war. The study is set in post-conflict Iraq. It's a context where we can expect the social fabric to be already fragile, and so the consequences of new inequality that is induced by the process of recovery could be potentially quite acute, right? So we're looking at a case where if there is going to be any negative backlash as a result of these grants, we would expect to pick it up here. And addressing this question about uneven recovery requires three components of the study. First, it requires exogenous variation in the benefits of recovery and growth. Second, it requires measures of social cohesion and economic outcomes that look at both generalized outcomes and directed outcomes. Directed in the sense that they are specific to certain social relations within the community. And third, we need to be able to disaggregate effects by network position between people who are directly benefiting and people who are indirectly exposed through social and economic networks. What is the theory that inspires our thinking about this problem? Well, we draw on three traditions within the literature on relative deprivation, on group position, and the literature on network-embedded resources. And so, what insights do we draw from this literature? Well, first, we think that economic recovery is going to influence social cohesion not just through the absolute changes in economic conditions, but also through relative changes, comparisons between people within the community. So it's about inequality rather than just a reduction in poverty. And second, network position will determine both material exposure, so we can think about capital as being accessible through social and economic networks. We can think about social capital. But also, it's going to be the reference point against which gains are evaluated. So if I'm closer to someone who is benefiting from a grant, I may have more chances of benefiting economically in an indirect way because of the sharing of resources. But also, I will be closer to this new reference point against which I will be evaluating my conditions. And so, once again, we have ambiguous expectations about the effects of uneven gains from recovery on our three groups of people within the study. The beneficiaries, who are feeling absolute gains that should reduce felt deprivation, but they might also affect how these beneficiaries are relating with others in the community. Their social ties, their friends, who may see benefits from indirect exposure, but also see this shifting reference point, and their professional ties, people who are interacted in the same economic markets within those communities that create both the potential for interdependence and for competition. The context for the study is Iraq after the 2014-2017 conflict against the Islamic State, which caused large-scale violence and displacement. And so we're thinking about a context where most of the towns that we're studying saw an economic collapse and high levels of unemployment. So the national labor force participation rate is around 68–70% for men and 11% for women. In our communities, it is actually much lower. Only about 1 in 4 are economically active at baseline before the start of the study. And our baseline social cohesion measure pick up competition over resources and economic grievances as the most salient dimensions of social cohesion in these communities, something which we also confirm through qualitative focus group discussions that we did in these communities at the start. The grant that we're studying is operated by IOM. It's an unconditional $2,000 grant that targets applicants screened for multidimensional vulnerability and who demonstrated interest and some basic capacity to start or expand a small-scale business. We have about 1,000 grants that are randomly assigned among 2,000 applicants across 18 communities in 4 governorates. For those who are familiar with Iraq, it's Anbar, Diyala, Saladin, and Nineveh. And which is quite important from a methods perspective, program saturation is quite low. Applicants are about 5% of the population, and beneficiaries are half of that, 2.5% of the population. I'll talk a bit more about why this is important later on, but also from a theory perspective, this sort of gives you an insight into how the program is going to affect inequality, because the number of beneficiaries is quite low relative to the population. And so what are the core aspects of the research design? Well, it's a randomized controlled trial that looks at a range of outcomes. We have economic outcomes that are pretty standard, and 7 dimensions of social cohesion that we measure through indices from survey indicators with inverse covariance weighted indices for trust, civic engagement, inclusive beliefs, competition, contact, grievances, and interdependence. And so we draw on different literatures that have looked at different aspects of this problem, and we try to measure as comprehensively as possible these different dimensions of social cohesion. And for each of these dimensions, we measure it in 2 ways. We measure undirected attitudes and behaviors that capture broad social cohesion within the community. And we have dyadic measures that look at the relationship between the network referral and the seed, the person who applied to the program and who was assigned to treatment and control. So we ask these individuals to talk about the specific relationship with a named alter, with a specific person. We have 3 samples. As I mentioned earlier, we have our applicants who are randomly assigned to treatment and control. We have social ties that are elicited at baseline. We ask people to tell us the name of a person who lives close by, they regularly talk with, and that is not in their household. We ask them to think about 5 of these people, and then we try to interview the closest one to them. And similarly for professional ties, we ask about someone who works close by and generates income in the same way, so has the same occupation. This is to try and capture people who may be competing in the same markets, or potential competitors, where we may expect economic negative effects to be higher. And the identification strategy relies on a core assumption, which is not cross-edge interference. So I don't want to get too technical here, but the idea is that if there are any indirect effects, we would expect these to be channeled through these primary ties that are measured in the survey. And this is plausible because of low program saturation, so few people in the community are exposed to the grants. And second, because we did a baseline mapping of exposure to other potential applicants to the program, both beneficiaries and control members, and we found that these are generally very few. So what we're going to be doing is comparing first our treatment and control group, and then the economic networks of the treatment group with the economic networks of the control group, and also the social networks of the treatment group with the social networks of the control group. So this gives us a clean identification for spillover effects to proximate social networks. What are the findings? To summarize them, we see strong economic gains on recipients, and they become stronger from 6 to 12 months. We see that recipients' socially cohesive attitudes improve, and they solidify over time. We see improvements in grievances and competition, and improvements in trust. Now, we normatively order our outcomes. So when I show a positive effect on grievances, this is actually a decrease in grievances. When I show a positive effect on competition, this is a decrease in competition. I just want to make sure this is not confusing people. We do that so that the plots all look the same. And at the same time, we see evidence of negative spillovers on these dyadic relationships. So we find that social and professional peers perceive unequal opportunities relative to the recipients, the people who are getting the grants. We also see some increase in economic exchange between the recipients and their professional peers at midline, 6 months after treatment is delivered, but this fades away by the end line. So just to confirm that these grants are having a meaningful effect on economic outcomes, we see a sharp increase in the percentage of members of the treatment group that own a business. It goes from about 10% to about 35%, and a similarly meaningful increase in the number who worked over the past month that goes up to over half, as well as meaningful increases in assets and monthly business income. So the grants worked, they achieved their intended purpose of increasing economic outcomes. Now, here I'm going to present our core results that are in units of standard deviation, so they're a bit harder to interpret for the economic outcomes, but at the same time, they have a standardized relative measure for all the different outcomes. And so once again, first I'll show you the midline results, which are in these faded gray coefficient plots. Increase in business, ownership, income, assets, employment, income, as well as expenditure. And we don't see so much effects at midlines on net transfers. On professional peers, at midline, we see a small increase in the proportion that is owning a business and in business assets. So we see that there is some sort of emulation going on where the professional peers of the treatment group relative to the professional peers of the control group are also starting new activities. For the social ties, we don't see at midline any changes between the social ties of the treatment group and the social ties of the control group. How does the picture change at endline? So after 12 months, well, the economic effects, by and large, become stronger and larger. There is, in fact, negative net transfer, so the treatment group starts giving money to others in the community. Professional peers, however, we don't see any effect. We don't see a positive, but we also don't see a negative effect. Those initial positive spillovers that we picked up at 6 months fade away. But I think the key takeaway from this is the absence of negative effects. Remember that these are competitors in output markets. The core criticism that is sometimes moved against this kind of programming is that the grants would be displacing business from competitors to the beneficiaries, and we don't see this happening. The professional peers continue, to the extent that they had a business, to run that. Social ties, once again, the effects are null. We don't see positive effects. We also don't see negative effects on economic outcomes. What about our directed economic measures? So these are relationships between the applicants and the professional peers, and then we ask the professional peers about the same relationship, but from their perspective. And so I've put on the same figure here both the midline and the end line just to save time. What we see is that for the professional peers, let's see if I have, no, I don't have. At the bottom side, you will see that there is at midline an increase in the proportion who is buying and selling or transferring money with the applicants. But this fades away by the end line. So this initial increase in exchange fades away. Social cohesion. These are our generalized measures, so measures that are about social cohesion within the community more broadly. And you can see that both at midline and at end line, we see an improvement in grievances and competition for applicants. So there is a decrease in grievances and competition. And by end line, we also see that these people are more trusting. They have higher levels of interpersonal trust towards other members of the community. For professional peers and social ties, we don't see a positive or a negative effect. And I think this is reassuring to the extent that the main concern here was about a possible negative spillover, which we don't capture, despite having fairly tight confidence intervals around our measures. The directed social cohesion outcomes, so these are asking us about the relationship between peers and applicants. This is where we see the negative reaction. So professional peers have a worsening in dyadic grievances towards the applicants, same for social ties. This means that the social and professional ties of the treatment group perceive unequal opportunities relative to the people who get the grants. We don't see, however, this transferring into negative changes in other dimensions of this dyadic relationship. We don't see lower levels of contact, we don't see lower levels of trust, and we don't see lower or higher perceptions of interdependence. So when we try to explore mechanisms here, I have 2 more minutes, right? Or how much? I have time? Okay. We see that, first of all, the program implementer is overwhelmingly seen as fair. This is reassuring for us, of course, even among the network members, so even among the people who are not directly benefiting from the program, around 84 to 89, depending on the group, are perceiving the implementer as fair. There's a positive treatment effect there on applicants, and the coefficient on the network peers is positive but insignificant. So this rules out the idea that the grievances might be originating from a perception of unfairness in the distribution of the grant. That's not the case. Where are the grievances coming from then? Well, we find some suggestive evidence that we want to investigate a bit more in further work, that this is coming from norms of reciprocal giving that are particularly strong in these communities. We find this by looking at heterogeneity by baseline perceptions of interdependence. People that at baseline had stronger perceptions of interdependence relative to other members of the community, that's where we see, at least at midline, a stronger backlash towards the beneficiary of the grants, right? A higher share of them saying that they perceive unequal opportunities relative to them. And so we interpret this as potentially an indication of the fact that the failure to share some of these benefits from the grants are what is creating these perceptions and grievances. We also see that the dyadic grievances become weaker at 12 months at our end line when professional ties had stronger connections to the seeds at baseline. So people who are socially more proximate, this helps the grievances fade away. Overall, the takeaway is that the grants preserved community-level social cohesion and led to an improvement in social cohesion for the recipients. When we think that these are, by and large, marginalized, both ethnically and economically, recipients, this is a very positive story from the broader national perspective. The cost that we see is narrow and localized. It is not a negative backlash in terms of perceptions of social cohesion within the community. It is a specific perception of unequal opportunity towards the recipient of the grant. And the functional relationship, exchange, contact, perceptions of trust, remains unaffected. So we think this means that the negative spillovers, they're there, but they're not particularly concerning, at least in this context. And we hope that this work together resolves some of these contradictory but common claims regarding the effects of social cohesion, the effect of grants on social cohesion, where often, especially in policy circles, opinions can be quite polarized between people who think that the effect is very positive or think that the effect is very negative. And what we find is that really we need to disaggregate these effects and look at their different components.
Great, thank you, and yeah, thanks for the time. No worries. We still have about 10 minutes for the questions, and I've even been allowed to steal a bit from your coffee break if if necessary, because we started late. So I saw one hand here. If we could get a mic to the table in the front, here, just here. Thank you. I see one there after. Yeah.
Thank you, great work. So I was thinking a little bit on...
Not sure the mic is on.
Right? So you are giving people money, and then you're kind of mechanically seeing positive effect. I mean, just talking about the direct effects on beneficiaries, right? And then it's kind of mechanical. I'm in my mind, I'm like, okay, yes, you're giving them money, like you see positive effects, but I guess that the more relevant question is it cost effective? You're giving them this amount of money, how much benefit are they deriving from this? And is there any other policy that would be more cost effective? Because at the end, this is a problem of we don't have enough resources, right? So we need to invest in the most effective ones. And so it is, to me, a little bit mechanical that you would find a positive effect of cash on the beneficiaries itself. So that's one side. And the other one is on the spillover effects. So you said that the saturation effects are not important because they are like 2 to 5% of the population. But I think this is actually quite high, and there is very likely general equilibrium effects. So if you give a bunch of people cash, there is kind of, in this economy, changes in prices, changes in consumption, and that is going to be indirectly affecting these social ties and these, professional ties. And so there is some sort of thing you need to do in the paper to convince us that that's not there too. Like there's this confounding effect. So I am a friend of this beneficiary, but I am also indirectly, affected in the economy where people are receiving more money. The work by Ted Miguel and others. So I think those two things will help you sharpen it. But I think that the work is very good and moving in a very promising direction. Congratulations.
Do you want to react or comment?
Yeah, let me say a few words. So I think the cost effectiveness point, it's a good one. I don't think this is the most cost effective policy if we want to increase social cohesion. But I don't think that's the goal of the policy, right? Like the goal of the policy is to create economic recovery. And I think in those terms, grants are actually very effective. And I would say cost effective. Maybe an economist would be better placed than me as a political scientist to talk about cost effectiveness, but I think the evidence is generally there. I think that the concern that we're addressing is that this cost effectiveness of the grants on economic recovery is coming at a social cost. And what we're trying to show here is that this social cost is actually very minimal and probably even overridden by the positive effect on the beneficiaries. So that's what we're trying to show, not that this is the best policy to improve social cohesion, for sure. On the second point about general equilibrium effects, yes, I mean we could definitely do a bit more on that, look at trends and things like that. I think to the extent that there are general equilibrium effects, what we're picking up would be still the comparison between the additional spillover on through the proximate ties between the people who are proximate to the treatment, and expect to see it on these people. So I think the fact that we have a null on these very close ties is sort of in itself evidence of the fact that it's unlikely that we would see strong general equilibrium effects here. But you're right that we can do more there.
Thank you. Yes, so there was a gentleman with the red tie there. If someone can get microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, working with Inkomoko, Kenya. So thanks, that's really an interesting study. Actually, I think I was of the contrary opinion regarding how this would affect the social ties between those who benefit and those who don't. Interesting to see, it's very positive. So the question is, did you find externalities or spillovers that spoke to why we had positive ties? For example, did these people benefited from this program? Did they start businesses that are not competing with the others such that we ended up having positive relations and not being affected? Or what really made them have positive ties, if at all we are making them start businesses? So, and then number two is around the program design itself. So you said your key objective was to ensure economic recovery. So we see in most programs, if we give money to some people directly and it's just a grant, it's not even a loan. So did you consider the possibility of these people transitioning beyond grants? Like, for example, are we seeing them transiting to probably getting money that is not grant, maybe loans from banks, etc.? So were there other things beyond the grant that you are able to measure as additional benefits of getting the grant beyond starting a business? Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe let me start with the second question. So generally, other opportunities aside for these grants are quite limited. There are other aid actors in Iraq, but the communities are chosen to be areas where other programming is not going on. And access to financial markets is extremely limited in Iraq. It's a very dysfunctional financial sector. So this is one of the few ways in which people are actually able to find the resources to grow and expand their business. For the point about how do we see this improvement in social cohesion? Well, I don't think it's not so much that they have more positive or sort of new relationships with other people. We don't see them forming new connections. It's rather their perception of competition over resources and perception of grievances over the lack of economic opportunity and inequality is decreasing. So we see this changing. And so this is, in part, as Sandra was saying, is something that we would expect sort of to be driven by the improvement in economic conditions and subjective well-being.
I think we can have like 2 more questions. Take the question here, and then maybe you can take back the mic after to ask a question as well. Go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. I will make it quick. So I find this very interesting. I'm obviously interested in Iraq. I would like to know a little bit more about who is actually applying for these grants and who is actually in the study. And then, so I wonder whether in this post-conflict environment, where in these communities, some people can't return, there are these tribal structures. And so I wonder whether these people are actually having a special status in the community and there's sort of no social cohesion backlash to them receiving grants because it's kind of, they have a specific status as the ones that could apply to this or could express interest. So I would love to see some comparative statistics about how they fare to other people in the community.
A social network referral. So the thing is, these communities are really quite overwhelmingly facing economic deprivation. And so even though there is this screening based on vulnerability, it ends up that people are just generally poor across the board.
Okay, thank you. I think one last question here.
Thanks. Thanks so much for this presentation. I had a question about how you are surveying people about their social contacts and their professional contacts. I think from having worked on a cash grant RCT in East Africa, I think people assume that when they give their names of other people in their community, then those people will be able to benefit from being associated with the organization. So I think that some of the claims that you're making are dependent on that people aren't actually going to give the name, that people are giving the names of their competitors rather than their friends. But how can you be sure that they're not giving the names of their friends and that there might be these negative impacts on their competitors that we just don't know about because you don't know the names of those people?
Yeah, I think what we can do there is look at heterogeneity among these competitors, and even if we look at ones that are further away socially from the seeds, we see a similar pattern. The dyadic perception of unequal opportunity is stronger, but we still don't see broader negative effects there. And so this is reassuring that there isn't a big difference there.
Great, thank you. I know there were a lot of other hands. Maybe you can continue conversation at coffee break, or I don't want to take too much of your coffee break and mine, actually. And there is also a session after that I want to be responsible for delays. But thanks a lot to the 2 speakers. I think we can applaud again. And thank you.